All right. Dr. Jim Beck reading some of Dr. Childress's Foundations. This is at page 61, talking about personality and attachment. Maintaining a continually fused psychological state is impossible to achieve for two independent, autonomous individuals in relationship. Since a relationship involves two separate psychological integrities, minor breaches in their shared psychological state arises from normal range empathic failures will occur. In response to these ruptures in the shared psychological state, the partners engage in a series of more or less effective communications and relational moves to first try to maintain their coordinated state and then to repair a breach in their shared psychological state when this occurs. The approach by which the relationship partners seek to repair minor breaches to their relationship is dependent upon their internal working models of attachment. The formation of closely bonded emotional relationships and the repair of minor breaches to these attached relationships have been extensively studied in early childhood mental health because this is the period in which the initial internalized patterns for attachment bonding are created. The subtle rhythms of mutual relationship coordination and repair are also more clearly displayed during early childhood attachment bonding. Edward Tronick, a preeminent investigator of relationship processes, describes the interpersonal relationship dance that leads to the formation of a shared psychological state between parent and child. In response to their partner's relational moves, each individual attempts to adjust their behavior to maintain a coordinated dyadic state or to repair a mismatch. Mutual regulation is particularly successful. That is when the age-appropriate forms of meaning, for example, affects, relational intentions, representations, from one individual state of consciousness are coordinated with the meanings of another state of consciousness. A dyadic state of consciousness emerges. The formation of a shared psychological state, described by Tronick as a dyadic state of consciousness, is more generally referred to as an intersubjective, quote-unquote, psychological state in the research literature and as psychological intimacy in the general population. The formation of this shared psychological state stabilizes the psychological functioning of both people in the relationship, particularly of the child in the parent-child relationship. According to Tronick, 2003, at page 475, he states, "A dyadic state of consciousness has dynamic effects. It increases the coherence of the infant's state of consciousness and expands the infant's and the partner's state of consciousness. Thus, dyadic states of consciousness are critical, perhaps even necessary for development." Tronick, the Tronick article being cited is, if there, it's the, of course, all relationships are unique. How procreative processes generate unique mother-infant and patient-therapist relationships and change other relationships. This concept of the block, of intersubjective intimacy slash the repair of relational breaks is really important, I think. But maintaining the coordinated rhythm of a shared state of consciousness over extended periods of time is not possible for two separate psychological integrities. Inevitable empathic failures occur, creating breaches in this shared psychological state. They quote Kohut, 1971. The analysis of the self, and they also re-quote Tronick, the 2003 one about, of course, all relationships are unique. They also quote another one, Tronick, or Trevarth in 2001, which is the neurobiology of early communication, intersubjective regulations in human brain development. And that's in Calvivore AF and Ramsberger A, the editors of the Handbook of Brain and Behavior in Human Development, from London Kluwer Academic Publishers. These minor breaches in the shared psychological state of the relationship partners establish psychological boundaries that are inherent to the separate psychological integrity of the two separate individuals. Minor breach and repair sequences are critical relationship experiences in the formation and maintenance of healthy relationships. This breach and repair, I think, might be part of what's at process when we see the intense emotionality associated with exchanges when the child leaves either mother or father and then goes with either mother and father and vice versa. Minor breach and repair sequences are critical relationship experiences in the formation and maintenance of healthy relationships. In repairing these inevitable breaches to the shared psychological state, the two relationship partners communicate self-authenticity within the relationship and simultaneously develop approaches for repairing the relationship in response to inevitably empathic failures. Tronick describes the importance of these relationship breaches to the development of healthy relationships, again quoting from Tronick's 2003 at pages 477 and 478. Unlike many other accounts of relational processes which see interactive misses, quote unquote, for example, mismatches, misattunements, dysynchronies, miscoordinations, as indicating something wrong with an interaction, these misses are the interactive and affective stuff from which co-creative reparations generate new ways of being together. Instead, there are only relationships that are inherently sloppy, messy, and ragged, and individuals in relationships that are better able, or less able, to co-create new ways of sloppily being together. Out of the recurrence of reparations, the infant and another person come to share the implicit knowledge that we can move into mutual positive states even when we have been in a mutual negative state, or we can transform negative into positive affect. Getting back to the text again of Childress, however, the attachment patterns of the narcissistic and borderline personality organization are fundamentally unable to repair breaches that occur in the relationship. The early childhood attachment experiences that should have led to an understanding for how we can move into mutual positive states even when we have been in a mutual negative state were absent from the formative experiences of the narcissistic borderline personality. When breaches occur in the subjective state of shared psychological understanding, the narcissistic and borderline personality structure collapses into primal disorganization. In the formative processes of creating a disorganized attachment in the childhood of the narcissistic and borderline personality, the parenting practices experienced by the narcissistic borderline personality as a child were so confusing, disorienting, and frightening that the child was unable to develop a coherent strategy for forming an attachment bond to the parent and for breaching repairs to the relationship when they occurred. The narcissistic and borderline personality is unable to transform negative into positive affect. Because the narcissistic personality cannot repair relationship breaches when they occur, the narcissistic borderline personality therefore seeks to maintain a continually fused, quote, dyadic state of consciousness, end quote, with the attachment figure. The internal working model of relationship contained in the attachment networks of the narcissistic borderline personality structure are unable to repair breaches of to the coordinated dyadic state when they occur. For the narcissistic borderline personality, relationship breaches with the attachment figure result in an immensely painful collapse of the narcissistic borderline personality self-structure organization into a highly disorganized and dysregulated state. The internal models of the narcissistic borderline personality attachment system that guide relationship responses for the formation and repair of attachment-mediated relationships do not contain patterns for how to move into mutual positive states when we have been in a mutual negative state. This means that when a breach in the fused psychological state occurs, the narcissistic borderline personality does not possess the internal resources necessary to repair the lost relationship coordination with the attachment figure, leading to a complete collapse of personality organization. It is therefore essential to the psychological state regulation of the narcissistic borderline personality that a continually fused dyadic state of consciousness with the attachment figure be maintained in order to keep the narcissistic borderline personality in a regulated state. The borderline style personality seeks this continual fusion of psychological states with the attachment figure through an idealized perception of perfect love with a perfectly empathic and in tune relationship partner. The narcissistic style personality seeks this continual fusion of psychological states with the attachment figure through the perfectly reflective adoration of narcissistic self-reflection, called narcissistic supply, quote unquote, provided by the attachment figure. When the inevitable failure of empathy by the attachment figure occurs, the narcissistic borderline personality then collapses into a dysregulated and disorganized emotional and psychological state. The intensity of anger displayed by the narcissistic borderline personality in the collapse into disorganization is a means of trying to maintain self-cohesion in response to the collapse of psychological structure. The emotion of anger imposes a cohesive integration of self-organization during the period of anger. The intense displays of anger by the narcissistic borderline personality in response to empathic failures by the attachment figure imposes a degree of affective self-cohesion onto the collapsing narcissistic borderline personality structure.